Hi guys, yay, 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 yay. Okay, brand storyline. First I want to get like a feel of the room. Why did people come here today? Who has a startup that they're working on and they're trying to figure out their brand strategy for that? A couple startups. Others just came to learn, or we have full-fledged companies that are in revenue, growing. Okay. Okay, cool. Cool. So thank you, Rebecca, Knit Marketing. This is awesome. Pitch Genius, let me tell you a little bit about what we do. I strictly make presentations for tech startups. They're called pitch decks. If you don't know what a pitch deck is, we don't use formal business plans anymore that are 30 to 40 pages long to pitch investors, convince them to give us money. It's the evolution of the business plan has turned into a PowerPoint called the pitch deck. So they use that to pitch investors to raise money. So that's what I create. I've worked with a lot of great companies, and I'm proud that our portfolio of 40% has successfully raised funds. It took a lot to get there, but it's good news. And we focus on seed and Series A, so early stage startups, heavily content focused. And we do investor decks mainly, but we also do sales decks, presentation decks. Lots of PowerPoint in my life, like constantly on PowerPoint or Keynote. Slide. Cool. So they were talking about, why am I here talking to you today? So a lot of what I do is just fully understanding the investor's perspective and trying to help my clients create messaging that will speak to the investor, right? So to take it out of that, for you guys, we're trying to figure out, okay, what is my logo and what is my brand? What does the name of my company? What is my tagline trying to say to your specific audience? And we typically have multiple audiences, right? For my clients, they have investors that they want to speak to. They have their target market that they want to speak to. So there's always various audiences that you need to be aware of. But a part of our methodology in making sure to create storyline within your brand is definitely focusing on the content. What is the messaging? What it is you're trying to say? Research is so important. I have a whole slide on that. Design is always important, like the colors you're choosing, and design, yes, making sure it looks good, of course. But the main thing is storyline, right? So what is storyline? What is your brand storyline? Why is that so important? Go to the next slide. So storyline is extremely effective, right? So I make business plans all day, and in that you would kind of think, oh, why would you need a storyline within a business plan? Aren't you just trying to give investors numbers and stuff? And no, that's not true. Storyline is extremely important in making people remember your brand and making people understand your messaging. So why is storyline so effective, right? So storyline is something that is like a tale as old as time, right? So before we had books, when we were cavemen in caves drawing pictures on rocks, the way that we passed our traditions on, the way that we passed religion on for a very long time was through storytelling. Okay, so it's within our human nature to tell stories, to have conversation within storyline, with storyline. Don't even worry about it, it's fine. And I found a stat, which is on the previous slide, that says 65% of all of our conversation is told within a storyline manner. 65%, right? So why is that? It's because it activates something in our brain. It causes brain activation, studies have shown. It also it gives better recall, right? So when you provide a story that is easy to digest to your audience, whoever they may be, it's easy for them to remember it weeks later. Oh, that's the company that whatever. That's the company that did this really amazing, innovative thing, whatever it is, whatever you're providing them. So it's super effective. It causes for better recall, causes brain activation within your audience, and it makes it easy to digest. We like to listen to stories. That's the point. So what is your brand story? Does anyone have like something that they want to share as far as what your brand story is, what you feel like your brand story is? And it could just be like a couple of words. That's the other thing, is that it doesn't need to be like a storybook, right? Storyline can be used in very like subtle ways. It's about simple messaging. So anyone? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, my buddy and I were trying to start a new startup. It's called sitstandoutlet.com. And our main idea is to try to sell the smoothest desks that move up and down at the lowest price.
Okay, cool, awesome. So what did you do to figure out like what kind of branding you wanted to create?
That was his side.
That was his side.
Yeah,
okay.
That's something that he's the one that thought about that. But.
Okay, cool. But smooth, easy, standing desks,
Yes.
simple to use.
Yes.
Smooth, simple, easy. Those are three good words. That's a story right there, right? It doesn't have to be like this huge, elaborate thing. It's actually best when it's some just simple, concise verbiage. So let's go to the next slide. So where to start, okay? Storyline should start with market research, okay? And we'll do this in our breakout session. It's really, really important that you take out your extremely smart smartphone, your powerful tool that's in your pocket and your laptops, and you figure out who your audience is, right? So your audience comes from a generation, has a specific gender, comes from an age group, has interests, has different colors that speak to them. You gotta go online and really figure out who your target audience is and how, what their perspective is on your product and service, right? So let's say, for me, I'm selling pitch decks, right, to investors. I'll constantly have to keep in mind what the investor is thinking and what pleases him. So he's not really thinking about the product and the features and all of these things. He's really thinking about numbers and how are you going to make me my money back and how are you going to execute this idea. So when you're thinking about your brand storyline, it's very much, okay, who is my audience? What do they like? What speaks to them? And how can I create messaging that they will digest and they will be akin to? So with that, another fantastic way to do market research is look at your competition and see what your competition is doing. That was a huge part in me deciding my branding for Pitch Genius, right? So I looked at every presentation designer that was out there, and I looked at their logo, I looked at their services, I looked at the offering, their messaging, what were they saying? And there was a lot of like expert, like blues and grays and serious stock photos of like investor and presentation, right? And by looking at your competition, you can figure out, okay, maybe those are not the colors I want to use. Maybe those are not the stock photos I want to use. I want to differentiate myself. So a lot of your storyline is making sure that you're different and you're standing out. So you need to stand out from your competition, and then you need to understand exactly who your audience is, right? So, and that's really where you should begin in creating your storyline for your brand. So possible storylines, right? So to get your juices flowing and thinking of like different things that you can come up with. User lifestyle, right? So you're thinking about your user, you know everything about your target market, and you are creating a storyline that speaks to their lifestyle, right? Lifestyle branding. Apple does that all day. So Apple is a lifestyle brand. You buy it. Everything I own is Apple. I feel like that's a part of my lifestyle. So that's one way. Another way is like you're the innovative hero, right? Like we're changing things, we're turning things upside down on their head, and you can take that storyline and add it to your branding. People love backstory and like the evolution of ideas. So providing the backstory to something, whether it's the backstory of the team or the backstory of how you came up with your service and product, which is like, well, I saw this huge problem and I saw people were suffering, so I wanted to help them, whatever it is. Backstory, I mean, it's a story in itself, so there you go. The personal struggle story, right? Like the triumphant, I went through this and I came out on top and so can you. That's a storyline right there. Team, I mentioned. The expert approach. I am the expert on this subject. I know everything there is to know about standing desks, and this is why you should listen to me. Mission-driven, of course, is always a good storyline to provide, and a lot of companies do that. Like, my mission is getting more startups funded, right? So I constantly have that messaging out. And then personality, like really kind of formulating a personality around your brand. I keep relating it to my company, I'm sorry, but it's like the easiest example because I went through this process that you all went through, right? I had to do the same thing. So when I was thinking about my brand, I was like, I want it to be young, I want it to be hip, it has to be colorful, I want bold font, I want it to be bold. So like that's a part of my branding is like boldness, right? Getting startups funded, like that's a big statement. Like all I do is make pitch decks, right? But like I wanted people to understand like, no, this is bigger. This is not just about the pitch deck. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so storytelling, really like what does it boil down to? The exercise I have is gonna like make you write and kind of do a brain dump on creating your story. But what it really comes down to is just one simple message, one kind of imagery that you constantly want to put out to a specific audience. And again, like because you have multiple audiences, maybe that message adjusts every time you're targeting a different audience. But it's not this like, it shouldn't be this complicated thing in your mind of like, ooh, what's my story? It's like a whole page long. It's not about that. It's really concise, maybe even a few words, maybe just a sentence. So yeah, and next slide is breakout session. Yeah, so we're gonna brainstorm. We're gonna figure out a linear story that you can hold on to and talk about. And then we'll present to each other the brand storylines that we come up with, so. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
So from your experience of developing these pitch decks, which one do you feel is used the most often, and which one, like I would imagine of the storylines that you gave, one has like the best like success ratio, like this has a tendency to get the most?
It really depends on the startup, right? Not every startup is an innovative hero. So you can't really build that storyline into that and pretend to be an innovative hero when you're not. So it's also, think about your life and why you started your company and really what storylines already exist in there, and then make that an engaging topic and make that something that presents outwards. So it's not about what is most successful is telling your true story in the most clear and concise way. So that's been my experience with pitch decks. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question. So I know that you have a company and your company has a brand, but at a certain point, the person is sort of there representing the brand, and sort of, I'd be sort of curious to know how much you take into account who's telling the story that day, if you have multiple people on your team, and sort of if there are storylines that are better suited for different people for a number of reasons.
For
You
sure.
might not be a loud person, so the personality one might not be the best choice for you. But your company might be started by somebody who's a very charismatic leader. So sort of, how do you balance sort of the bearer of the story and the story of the company?
Right. So I would say it's kind of like two different things, right? So if you're talking about like being the spokesperson of your company and being out in the physical world talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's. I'll tell you from personal experience. I don't know the exact answer to that, but I'll tell you from personal experience. I make presentations, okay? People expect me to be a fantastic verbal speaker as well, and I think I've gotten better over time, but I don't think I'm that fantastic, right? But that's a part of my brand, right? I'm pitch genius. Like, I'm supposed to be the pitch genius. I'm supposed to know everything, right? So it's like I gave myself that storyline, which I'm happy about. I think it works, but yes, you do need to reflect it, and I think you definitely do need to reflect it. But in the case of, but I wasn't thinking about that when I created my brand. When I created my brand, it was more of who are startups, okay? What do startups like to see? This is like a very startup-y looking thing, right? So that was purposeful. The colors I chose were very vibrant. Like the website I have just says startups all over it. So I really was thinking about my client when I initially created the brand. And then yes, now when I go out in public, I also need to kind of be that pitch genius and play that facade. So yeah, does that make sense?
We're going to hand it over to the next
Okay,
speaker.
cool.
You guys can continue to ask questions in the breakout session.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.